Hi everybody. The following video is about the leadership principles learned from the military life that you can put to work to be an effective leader or any business person. The wonderful speech in this video gives you an insider look at how other current business leaders with military training have relied on the military principles to achieve success. It teaches how you can take the can-do military spirit into the workplace and be all you aspire to be and to win. As an example, the principles learned at West Point as a United States Army school, principles that you can apply to business with the same firepower and determination that makes the military personnel the best on the battlefield. In the military, there is no margin for error. Wrong decisions are deadly decisions. Likewise, in business, wrong decisions can cost you your job. This experience gives you an insider look at how business luminaries with military training such as Ross Perot, Marty Evans, Coleman and Roger Staubach have achieved success through the essential military principles, which are duty, impeccability, passion, perseverance, planning, teamwork, loyalty, flexibility, selfless service and integrity. So here's how. Ready? Let's move on.
Everyone wanted to know, do you think your military background helped you win The Apprentice? And even though my 4 years at West Point and 3 years of active duty in the Army ended 12 years ago, the answer was, and is, an unqualified yes. My military background and training were absolutely crucial factors, not only for winning The Apprentice, but for succeeding in every venture I've undertaken since that very influential time in my life. At first, I was matter-of-fact about it. Yes, of course my military training helped a lot. I might mention discipline, attention to detail, showing up on time and saying, yes, sir, and no, ma'am. But there is so much more to military leadership training than that. It is a whole process, a mindset, an accumulation of hundreds of lessons. Boiled down, they become principles that we learn to apply instinctively. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that what I learned at West Point and in my subsequent military service centered on 10 essential principles for effective leadership. These principles are applicable in the Army, the boardroom, or life. But I learned them at West Point, applied them in Ranger training as an intelligence officer, and then, after obtaining my law degree and an MBA at UCLA, in the 5 companies that I have been a part of, as either a founding partner or entrepreneurial manager. Certainly, they helped me win the privilege of working for Donald Trump, and they are the very foundation of how I live my life and run my businesses. The essential principles to take command in business and in life are: duty. Do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. Impeccability. If it is worth doing, it is worth doing right. Passion. Be passionate about what you do and do what you're passionate about. Perseverance. It's not the size of the dog in the fight, it's the size of the fight in the dog. Planning. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. Teamwork. There is no I in team. Loyalty. Remain loyal up, down, and across your organization. Flexibility. In all aspects of life, the person with the most varied responses wins. Selfless service. Give back. And integrity. Take the harder right over the easier wrong. These principles sound simple, but it takes discipline, training, and devotion to keep them front and center in everything you do. But if you can achieve that, you can achieve your goals, whatever they are. Don't just take my word for it. Since my apprentice win, I have spoken with a number of outstanding individuals who excelled both in their military careers and in their business lives. You might have heard of them without knowing about their military background. Roger Staubach. The greatest quarterback Navy ever had, Roger won the Heisman Trophy in his junior year. After graduating from the Naval Academy, he spent 4 years on active duty, including a tour of Vietnam, before starting his pro football career with the Dallas Cowboys. One of the greatest NFL players of the 1970s, he led the Cowboys to 2 Super Bowl wins. He retired from pro football in 1979 as the highest-rated passer of all time and was elected to the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1985. He founded the Staubach Company in the late 1970s to represent users of office, industrial, and retail space. Today, the Staubach Company has more than 1,300 employees and 50 nationwide locations and encompasses finance, design, construction, and portfolio management. Roger is dedicated to building his company on his core principles of trust and integrity, which he gained in the U.S. Navy. James V. Kimsey. After graduating from West Point, Jim Kimsey served 3 combat tours as an airborne ranger, 2 in Vietnam and 1 in the Dominican Republic, and was inducted into the Ranger Hall of Fame. He transformed quantum computer services into the giant America Online as its founding CEO. AOL is the nation's best-known provider of interactive online services. In 1996, he became chairman emeritus of AOL and now devotes his efforts to philanthropy through the Kimsey Foundation, whose overarching mission is to help disadvantaged young people succeed through education and technology. Ross Perot. Mr. Perot was class president, chairman of the honor committee, and battalion commander at the Naval Academy in the early 1950s. He borrowed $1,000 from his wife Margot to start EDS, a one-man data processing company, which he sold to GM in 1984 for $2.5 billion. When he ran for President of the United States, he garnered the highest percentage of the vote for a third-party candidate since Theodore Roosevelt. I think Ross is living proof that if you work hard enough, you can accomplish anything. Marty Evans. The President and Chief Executive Officer of the Red Cross is, at the time of this writing, doing an amazing job leading the relief efforts following the devastation of Hurricane Katrina. Her 29-year career in the Navy prepared her well for the challenge of leading the largest and most respected humanitarian aid organization in the United States. Marty did much to expand the professional roles for women in the Navy and retired in 1998 as a Rear Admiral, one of the few women to reach this rank. Before joining the Red Cross, Marty was the CEO of Girl Scouts of the USA, where she increased membership, brought the level of volunteers to an all-time high, and expanded diversity among its members. During my interview with Marty, I was impressed by her dedication to helping others and her phenomenal ability to devise and execute plans. Bill Coleman. Growing up in a military family, Bill studied computer science at the U.S. Air Force Academy and served as the Chief of Satellite Operations for the Office of the Secretary of Defense. After leaving the military, he rose to head software development for Sun Microsystems before striking out on his own to found BEA Systems, which became the leader in internet infrastructure software in the 90s and was the fastest software company ever to reach $1 billion in annual sales. He is currently focusing on automating IT operations as the CEO of Casat Corporation. A brilliant software visionary and high-tech entrepreneur, he is a noted philanthropist who founded the Coleman Institute, a research organization at the University of Colorado specializing in using computers to help people with cognitive disabilities. Anyone who spends any time with Bill can easily see that he is the ultimate planner. Pete Dawkins. Pete Dawkins was an outstanding cadet at West Point, serving as the first captain and brigade commander of the Corps of Cadets and president of his class of 1959. He played baseball, was an All-East defenseman and assistant captain of the hockey team, and was captain of the 1958 Army football team, the last Army team to record an undefeated season. In his senior year, he won the Heisman Trophy and the Maxwell Trophy and was selected as a Rhodes Scholar. He attended Oxford University and later earned a Ph.D. at Princeton's Woodrow Wilson School. In his distinguished 24-year military career, he was airborne and Ranger qualified and earned the Distinguished Service Medal, the Legion of Merit, 2 Bronze Stars with V for Valor, and 3 Vietnamese Gallantry Crosses. He retired from the Army at the age of 43 as a brigadier general. Since that time, Pete has spent 22 years in private business, most of it in the financial services industry. His experience has spanned investment banking, partner at Lehman Brothers, strategy consulting, managing partner of Bain & Company, insurance and investment, chairman CEO of Primerica Financial Services, Inc., insurance, vice chairman and EVP of Travelers Insurance, and banking, vice chairman of the Citigroup Private Bank. Pete embodies the term leadership. He has excelled at a remarkably wide range of pursuits. He attributes his drive, sense of integrity, and commitment to excellence to his parents, to his Midwestern upbringing in Michigan, and to his formative experience at the military academy. Each of these accomplished individuals agrees that the 10 core principles taught by the military form the foundation for their success. Hey, even Donald Trump attended a military high school. These 10 principles can work for you too. Whether you're seeking success in a boardroom, on the playing field, on a sales call, fundraising, leading troops in Iraq, or starting your own small business, the principles necessary to take command and be effective are the same. For you servicemen and women who are preparing to enter the civilian workforce, take heart and be proud of your service. The business world needs your principles and your training. For those of you without a military background, don't worry. These principles are achievable outside the military, and now is the time for you to learn. Chapter 1. Duty. Do what you're supposed to do when you're supposed to do it. Duty was a straightforward concept at our house. Bottom line, it meant doing what I was supposed to do without being told to do it. My parents divorced when I was 6 years old, and I lived for the next 10 years with my mother in Florida. Then, at 15, I decided to live with my dad in Cheyenne, Wyoming. I knew I'd be in college in a few years, and I wanted to get to know my dad better before I left. In high school, I played football, baseball, tennis, and ran track, but basketball was my true love. My schedule was crammed, but my dad, a successful real estate developer, insisted I find a job on top of everything else. He wanted me to learn what it takes to earn money myself. He had the right idea. So I got a job at McDonald's and worked after school and on weekends. Over the summer, I worked on a ranch. The ranch hands got a good laugh when on my first day of work, I showed up wearing a baseball cap, tank top, and sweatpants. They were all dressed in stiff jeans, boots, long-sleeve shirts, and rawhide gloves. I realized why after about 8 hours of baling hay. When I limped home that first day, blood was running down my arms and thighs. For those of you that have never come in contact with real, cut hay, you have to handle it carefully. It is very sharp. The farmhands all got a kick out of the city kid working on a ranch, but as the summer progressed, I actually got proficient enough to brand cattle. Branding was a team effort. One cowboy sat on the ground and hooked a boot heel behind the calf's back leg to hold its hind quarters, and the other placed a knee on its upper shoulder and held its front leg to further immobilize it. Another ranch hand would brand the calf, give it a shot of medicine to prevent infection, and quickly trim its horns before releasing it back into the herd. I learned a lot about ranching. It definitely toughened me up, strengthened me for the football season, and taught me respect for ranchers and farmers and the work they do. Actually, between McDonald's and the ranch, I covered a cow's life from birthing to burgers, and I learned what it meant to wake up at 4 a.m. to drive out to the ranch to bale hay all day under the blazing sun, to empty the trash at McDonald's, and to fit work in with sports and academics. Through it all, I didn't want to let anyone down. And as General Robert E. Lee says, duty, then, is the sublimest word in the English language. You should do your duty in all things. You can never do more. You should never wish to do less. Besides impressing upon me the importance of making my own money, my dad, a self-made man, had definite opinions on higher education. He believed it was the student, not the school, who determined the quality of one's education. I agreed, but I also knew that it was important to create networks for success. No one can do it entirely on his or her own. I knew I could get a great education at the University of Wyoming, but I wanted to be on a fast track with students at Stanford or Harvard. For my junior year, I set up an elaborate chart listing all the pros and cons of various schools. No school even came close to what the U.S. Military Academy had to offer. So at 16, I started networking to make my way through the highly competitive application process. One day, then Congressman Dick Cheney was speaking at the crosstown rival high school. I sat through his speech and afterwards introduced myself, telling him that I was interested in attending a military academy. We're all familiar with the saying, it's not what you know, it's who you know. Meeting Dick Cheney certainly helped me. He, of course, later served as Secretary of Defense while I was an Army officer, and now he's Vice President of the United States. I'm a huge believer in networks, in connecting people and helping them out. Mr. Cheney kindly did that for me, providing my official nomination to West Point, the final step of a grueling application process. I received an early acceptance to West Point during my senior year of high school. Now that I was in, I figured I'd better go see exactly what I was getting myself into. My dad and I flew out to New York, and I spent the night with a cadet in his barracks while my dad stayed in Hotel Thayer on the Army post. And yes, West Point is on an Army post, not a college campus. The cadet escorted me to a lunch formation, and I attended several classes. It was a March day on the Hudson River, and the weather was freezing cold, gloomy, and gray. But the sheer history and stature of the campus made a tremendous impression on me. The West Point program, which focused on intellectual, physical, military, and moral ethical training, was very impressive. The weight of history that hung over the almost 200-year-old Army post was awesome. I was barely 18 years old, and it was amazing to think that I could receive the same training as Ulysses S. Grant, Robert E. Lee, Douglas MacArthur, Dwight D. Eisenhower, George S. Patton. The famous names went on and on. It was a popular saying at West Point. Much of the history we teach was made by people we taught. What was most inspiring was that I knew and could see that West Point didn't just provide a great liberal education, it provided real leadership training. Still, I was facing a huge decision. West Point was hardly your typical run-of-the-mill college experience. Many of my friends from Florida and Wyoming were heading off to schools like Stanford with outstanding academic reputations, or schools where sports and parties were the primary attraction. I, on the other hand, was committing myself to 4 years of the most rigorous discipline and training with little freedom, and on top of that, a 5-year stint as a United States Army officer after graduation. I was facing duty for the next 9 years, more than half my life up to that point. And as Johann Wolfgang von Goethe would say, how can you come to know yourself? Never by thinking, always by doing. Try to do your duty, and you'll know right away what you amount to. Going to West Point was a decision I have never regretted, not even for a moment. West Point was absolutely the right place for me. The official West Point mission is to educate, train, and inspire the Corps of Cadets so that each graduate is a commissioned leader of character, committed to the values of duty, honor, country, and to prepare them for a career of professional excellence and service to the nation as an officer in the United States Army. I give them credit for doing an excellent job. A key component of duty is accountability. That was instilled immediately and forcibly at West Point. As plebes, or freshmen, my classmates and I were immediately saddled with all kinds of daunting responsibilities, none of them optional. Life was a blur of classes, drill, sports, studying, and the many other tasks that were assigned to us. We had to do them all, like them or not, it was our duty. And as Joseph F. Newton says, a duty dodged is like a debt unpaid. It is only deferred, and we must come back and settle the account at last. Like many of my classmates, I did not miss a single class, not once in 4 years, for the simple reason that I wasn't allowed to. Roll was taken at the start of every class. There was no such thing as not completing an assignment or failing to turn in homework. This was not at all like regular college, where a student might say, "Oh, I blew off the paper," or "I let that assignment slide." Skipping assignments and taking the F was not even within the realm of possibility. It just did not happen. We actually attended classes and learned the material. Then, of course, there was our military training, which included everything from tactical training to parade or drill exercises. For much of the year, parades were held for the public who came by to see what West Point is all about. We were told that parades were an excellent way to build discipline and attention to detail. Preparing our uniforms, being inspected, marching with precision, and standing in formation for hours in the heat, cold, or rain. Endless hours of standing still in hot wool uniforms, or, later in the year, walking in circles in the rain with icy winds blowing off the river, sure wasn't fun. It was a leadership challenge simply motivating everyone to do it. Roll call was taken at every drill formation, and just like class, there was no such thing as being unaccounted for. At West Point, as in the Army, there were no missing persons. If someone didn't answer roll call, another cadet was sent to find him or her and escort them to class or formation. There was literally no place to hide. A cadet might be really sick and legitimately need to see the doctor, but he or she would be tracked down and his or her whereabouts noted. We were training to be soldiers, the most serious job in the world, and accountability for every person was critical. You can't go to war and succeed without your full unit. In the bigger picture, the whole idea behind going to West Point is doing your duty for your country. General MacArthur gave a very famous speech to the cadets at West Point in 1962 when he accepted the Thayer Award for his distinguished service. He was in his 80s at the time, and his stirring message served as his farewell address. General MacArthur spoke eloquently about those three hallowed words, duty, honor, country, in one of the most inspirational speeches ever. As cadets, we were trained and prepared to make the ultimate sacrifice for our country, to put ourselves in harm's way, and to remember that when we gave or were given orders, they could involve life and death. The United States Army is a volunteer organization. Yes, there have been drafts to shore up the ranks in the past, but since my cadet days, it's been an all-volunteer force. And it's the strongest, greatest, and most effective fighting force in the world. Men and women who volunteer for the Army learn duty as a first principle. They center their lives on it. While West Point offers an excellent education, and the Army offers great training, programs, and a chance to see the world, the cadets and soldiers who step up and volunteer do it for duty's sake. When you think of duty, you immediately think of the military, and men like Roger Staubach. Staubach was drafted by the Dallas Cowboys in 1964, but completed his military service, including a tour in Vietnam, before starting his pro career. He didn't join the Cowboys until 1969, as a 27-year-old rookie. As a Heisman Trophy winner, Roger Staubach could have argued that he could do a better job representing the Navy as a football star rather than serving in Vietnam. But he didn't even consider it. He went to do his duty. An old Italian proverb says, "By learning to obey, you will know how to command." Roger told me, "When I was in high school, I went to visit the Naval Academy and really liked it. The mixture of discipline, solid education, and outstanding sports program just felt right to me. I was eligible for the pro football draft after my junior year because I had spent a year at junior college before entering the Naval Academy. But I knew that I still had 5 years of service ahead. I never even had a thought of leaving the academy early. 4 years when you're a young kid seems like an eternity, but I knew exactly what the deal was. 4 years of school and a 4-year Navy obligation. I certainly had the desire and the ability to play professional football, but I really enjoyed the camaraderie at the Naval Academy and in the military. I absolutely wanted to do my duty. When I graduated, I wasn't sure I would ever play football again, and I was all right with that. If I hadn't played pro football, there's a good chance I would have stayed in the Navy as a career." An equally compelling example of someone with an incredible sense of duty is the late Pat Tillman. He was a man who had it all. Pac-10 Defensive Player of the Year at Arizona State University, a fantastic player for the Arizona Cardinals. He was living at a level that maybe 0.1% of the entire population is capable of reaching. But after 9/11, when the call went out that the U.S. needed Special Forces troops, he volunteered to do his duty. He turned down a $3 million plus contract with the Cardinals to enlist in the Army, undergo Ranger training, and ship out to Afghanistan. Pat Tillman fought for a cause he believed was just and paid the ultimate price. No one ever said that doing your duty is easy or comes without great cost. Doing your duty means taking orders, sometimes from people you disagree with. You might not agree with your company's direction or your boss's latest decision, but doing your duty as an employee or team member means no bellyaching. Get with your team, get with the program, and do your part to accomplish the mission. Your day-to-day responsibilities and obligations at work, all the tasks you are charged with in whatever role you fill at your organization. None of these should be things that require constant monitoring or lots of discussion. Just do it. Duty goes beyond executing orders. It means assessing and doing what needs to be done. It means asking, what's the overall mission for my job and my employee's job in this company? This thinking is straight from the military. Military personnel take to heart the idea of, how do I make sure that the overall mission is accomplished? The military and almost every business operate in team environments. A good commander in the military wants to hear input from all his soldiers because the ramification of low morale and poor performance are death. It is much easier to fall in line and do your duty in the military because you've been trained that way. You take a direct order and follow what your officer says, period. It's second nature, something that has been ingrained from the moment you signed up. It makes for efficiency and effectiveness. Just before a decision is made and an order given, an officer reflects on training, doctrine, strategy, circumstances, resources, and personnel. No military decision is ever made willy-nilly. Duty does not mean blind obedience. A soldier can actually be prosecuted for following an unlawful order, as in the movie A Few Good Men. In the private sector, the same principle applies. You might have to execute orders you don't like, but there's no excuse for dishonesty, immorality, or illegality. Behaving honorably is your most important duty to yourself and your organization. You can't plead ignorance. You can't say, I was just doing what my boss told me to do. As the boss, you can't whine, I was just following the plan my CFO or accountant laid out. You must follow your internal moral compass. As a leader, especially a CEO or a board member, you have a duty to protect shareholders' interests. And as an employee, it might sometimes become your unfortunate duty to speak up when you identify underhanded or shady behavior. As Peter Drucker said, management is doing things right, leadership is doing the right things. Pete Dawkins is currently vice chairman of the Citigroup Private Bank, providing sophisticated wealth management services to clients worldwide. An outstanding cadet and athlete at West Point and a distinguished military leader who retired as a brigadier general, he has been a student of leadership for many years. He told me, one of the tyrannies of large organizations is that it often doesn't matter how good the overall organization is. If your immediate boss is a loser, your world is at best frustrating and potentially a dead end. On another note, he observed that in formal organizations, it's a tough call to tell the boss something he doesn't want to hear. There's a lot of talk about speaking up, Yet most people know when you tell the boss that what he is proposing is wrong, there's a good chance you won't change his mind. Furthermore, you may get fired, or, more likely, find years later that doing so disadvantages you down the line. The fact is, it takes courage to speak up, and it's risky. It's a very personal choice. It really comes down to, how do we want to live our lives? As a leader, your obligations are greater and your standards must be even higher. Let's take a very small, simple example. Say you work at a company with its main office in a large suburban office park. A bunch of employees are returning from their lunch break and see some trash scattered on the lawn of corporate headquarters. Most of them won't even give it a second glance. They barely even see it, and they certainly don't feel any need to pick it up. They just aren't invested enough, or feel a large enough sense of duty to the company. But if someone who owns shares in the company walks by, a board member, the CEO, the president, you want employees who will pick up the trash, who will do their duty in the big picture and down to the smallest detail. And someone who served in the military, not only will they pick up the trash, they'll make sure no one litters to boot. And as Harry S. Truman said, the buck stops here. At the time I applied for The Apprentice, I had been out of the Army for 10 years and had a number of entrepreneurial ventures behind me. When I was told I had been chosen for the show, I was a businessman living in San Diego. I had pressing obligations to 2 businesses. I was president of Core Objects, a software development company, where over 3 years the role had evolved from part-time consultant to a half-time employee responsible for corporate development to full-time president. At the same time, I was consumed with growing Motor Pride, a website for car enthusiasts, the first business I had conceived and built from the ground up with my friend and business partner, John Kraft. I talked to my business partners about my new commitment. During the filming of the show, I would be totally out of pocket. No calling in every day, checking messages, or following up with the clients. And of course, in the event I won, I would be completely removed from the businesses for at least 1 year and maybe forever. Because of the strong team we had developed over 3 years at Core Objects, I wasn't uncomfortable about leaving. One of the greatest accomplishments during my time there was building such a great team. I had every confidence in them and did not worry about going missing for an extended period. Motor Pride, however, was in a completely different position. It would be a great deal of slack for my partner, John Kraft, to pick up. Luckily, we had grown to the point where it was the right time to bring on a general manager. So we hired Klaus Holzapfel, a great marketer with a special interest in cars. We had the business model down, and now we had the manager to make it work. In retrospect, we had to wonder why we didn't do this sooner. Note to self and all of you entrepreneurs out there. Hire experts with deep domain knowledge to manage your businesses as soon as possible. In the Army, that's why we have warrant officers. I felt I could leave both Core Objects and Motor Pride because we had built them the right way with the right people. It is a hallmark of a good organization that it inspires people to grow and learn. Many of these people will eventually want to leave for new challenges. A good organization understands and even welcomes this. In the military, assignments are being changed all the time, and units learn to adapt. The military knows that duty includes doing the right thing for its people and developing their skills, even if it means moving that individual to another unit. In the private sector, a perfect example is McKinsey Consulting. When an employee says he wants to pursue other opportunities, McKinsey's response is, "Great, you'll continue to be paid for as long as you need to be, within reason. Do you need an office for a while? How about a secretary to help?" McKinsey understands that an ambitious person going to another business might become a client someday, or rejoin the company with new skills and experience. That whole defensive short-term perspective of, "You can't leave," or "pack up your stuff and get out right now," is simply bad management, bad business, and bad leadership. The military actually makes a point of cross-training people, assigning them to ports around the country and around the world, of sending people to school. Officers understand that it's not a matter of loss to unit, but of ultimate gain for the Army. Likewise, at Core Objects, we make a point of congratulating departing valued employees, letting them know how much we'd like them back and how much we'd love to do business with their new company. When I won my spot on The Apprentice, this same congratulatory response was given to me, and I was grateful for it. We made sure my responsibilities were covered, we thought of how I could leverage my opportunity for the benefit of our companies, and we talked about what sort of useful exposure our companies could get. When I became Donald Trump's apprentice, I recognized a new duty: to represent my former companies and colleagues as best as I could, and that included my brothers, literally in the case of 3 of my 4 younger brothers, and sisters in the military. Did serving in the military help me win The Apprentice? I know it helped me, and instilling in me a devotion to duty was a big part of it. The Apprentice and duty. My final task on The Apprentice, the ultimate challenge that would decide the winner, was to put on a charity polo event. I had no control over my team because they had already been fired. They had nothing to work for but their own self-respect, and I certainly counted on that in the selection process. I picked Elizabeth first because she was a strong marketer.